Right, in the first video what we did was create this sky by wetting the paper, putting some colour in, first a little bit of yellow and then stronger blues, and letting the actual paper do the work for me and letting it drift down by holding it up, blowing at it. And now we're going to work further down, and at the moment it's pretty much the same sort of thing. So you need to wet the whole of the bottom area. Make sure that you don't miss any bits, and I've left the tiniest little dry line between the bottom half of my picture and the top half. There's a reason for doing that, which will become clear a little bit later on. Then I'm going to do a reverse of what we did in the sky in a sense. I'm going to put a little bit of the yellow in. Instead of putting it in the middle, I'm going to put it just under that dry line and take it down into my painting on both sides. Right. If you get too strong a colour in a spot, then don't panic. Just wash your brush out, dry it a little bit and thin it down so that you don't want to be using strong colour, because this is all background. So that's the yellow in. Now I'm going back to the blue that I had, and I'm going to go over the top of that. Now that's quite strong, but it'll be alright. So I can pull it down on both sides. Okay, you can see that it's already beginning to run down. Now with the sky I had it coming at an angle. With the water I don't particularly want it coming at the same angle, so I'm going to hold my board up and let it run straight down. I'll put a little bit more blue in to give me a bit of more feeling that I'm actually looking at water. And as you can see, I'm leaving the middle area fairly blank. Okay, so we've got that there. I'll try and put this back in line where you can see it. Now I'm going to, while it's still wet, I'm going to mix up a bit of brown. I'm using the colours that I've got on this palette here, which is some red and yellow, and I'll put a little bit of this dark slaty blue into it. So I've got myself a fairly dark colour, and I'm going to put some quite strong marks. And there's a way of painting whereby you try and feel what it is you're painting. So if you're doing a very fine thing, your hand movements are going to be very fine. If you're trying to suggest bushes, you're going to be doing that with the way you show your bushes by the way you move your hand. So in other words, when you're painting skies, you're not doing this. You know, you're trying to get the feel of what you're doing. It sounds silly, but it's true. You know, whatever it is you're painting in your picture, adjust your hand movements to give it some chance. Often when people start out, they panic and they're going, oh, water, got to put water in, oh, you know, and away they go. So just be a little bit subtle about it, if you like. So I'll put this down the front. Now this is almost like silhouette. And again, there's not really any details. It's just letting the paint separate and spread. Okay? So what we're going to do now is I'm going to dry my brush. And I've got a bit of tissue here. Get all of the paint out of it. And I'm going to find this little white area and just take out any paint. Now sometimes it will pick up bits of paint and move it about, but what you're trying to do is to get rid of the obvious line and just confuse the eye of the viewer into thinking they're looking at something a long way off. You've got to take all the water out of your brush. It's quite important here. And you can even highlight, you can take out little bits of your dark water, and you wipe your brush, take out a bit more, wipe your brush, take out a bit more, and you're getting back, obviously not to the white paper, but you're giving the impression that there's some reflection on the water. And if your paper's very wet, you might need doing several times, but there's no water in my brush at all really. It's very, very dry. So we don't want to overdo it. Okay. So now you have got you've got your sky, you've got your water, and you've got some land that's close by. Now this land that's close by, you might not want it so dark. So while it's still wet, you know, with a bit of tissue, you can keep turning your tissue around. You can take out little bits of texture. Okay. And again, you'll paint in later on. Another little trick is to use a fingernail or to use a piece of card, and just to suggest, you know, in this case it's reeds or ferns or grasses, and you're dragging the paint off with your fingernail. Okay, and just put in, don't overdo it, just a few little lines here and there, and then leave it. Okay, if it's too wet, what will happen is the paint will go back in to the lines that you've scratched out, and they'll just look like you've, you know, scraped it. It won't look good. If it's too dry, nothing will happen. So you have to judge when the time is to be able to do this, and that just comes from doing it a few times so that you get used to it. Okay, let's just go back over it because we've only got a couple of minutes of this video. Then we'll move on to another video where I'll build on it some more in a minute. We'll put some trees in and various other things. So what we've got your sky with the atmosphere, you've got your lake or your big area of water anyway, and you've got your foreground. And this is a sort of perspective, you know, this is nearer, it's stronger, further back, and atmospheric. Okay, so at this point you need to leave everything to dry. There's a couple of things that you could have done, added at this point when it was wet. For instance, when the sky was wet, you could have done this, but much paler, over here, and you'd have got distant trees or the suggestion of distant hills or mountains, because as it dried, it would fade into the sky. So you needed to have done that at a stage when you were doing the sky. It would be a very much paler version of what we've got down here. Okay. Now, your paper's buckled at this moment in time, but you don't have to worry about that, because if you've actually stretched it properly on the board, when the whole picture dries, it will dry nice and flat. There's nothing worse than doing a good painting on bad paper or not having stretched the paper, and then you want to frame it because it's turned out really good. And what happens is that you have to bond the whole picture down with glue and various things onto card. You know, it all gets very messy and things. This technique is basically called wet on wet. Now, some people paint very detailed and very sharp little things. Other people leave everything to the imagination. You will find as you go on, and the more paintings you do, what suits you. You know, what medium you like best, whether it's watercolour or oils or acrylic, and also what way of working suits you. I like this wet on wet for starting off, and then I can put on top of it whatever I like, my buildings, boats, you know, sheep in the field, whatever you choose to paint, and that can be quite detailed, and this will give you a backing to that particular set of details that you're going to put in. So this video is coming to an end, and I hope to see you shortly in the next one. Thank you very much.